play the organ, and she really got pooped out, pumping this thing and playing it. So we had a guy, Carl Brunner, and he was the short, stubby butcher, just the nicest German guy. And so they put a long, like a 2x4 thing hid behind the curtain, and he would pump it. So my sister could just play. She wouldn't have to worry about pumping it and playing it. And one Sunday he fell asleep. My sister went to play the organ, there was nothing there. And she went, Carl! And he jumped up and grabbed that thing, lifted the organ about a foot off the floor. Everybody laughed. And on the first service that we had in the dance hall, my dad used Carl, because he was always around helping with everything, a butcher, and he had a lot of free time. And he said, Carl, would you light the candles on the altar? Sure. So Carl goes up on the altar on the first service. He got this big box of matches out, and he went like this on his pants and lit the candle. Well, my dad was, horrified, and he said, Carl, he said, you did a great job, but he said, could you do it, a little more dignified? Don't scratch it on, on your pants. He said, oh, yeah, okay. So the next Sunday he goes up there, he pulls out his box of big old stick matches and clicks it like this,
Yeah, just with his foot.
And the sulfur got underneath his thumb, and he said, damn it! The next Sunday, the third Sunday, my dad had a candle lighter for me.
The abalabra thing, whatever that they call that.
Well, candle
yeah,
lighter,
yeah.
Like the acolytes use.
So funny. All right, you think you're ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
This isn't going to be in the...
We can't put it on top of this, though. That's the only thing. If you want me to hold it, I can hold it.
It won't be in the way here.
Okay, yeah. This is going to be your sound right there.
You're from right here, so you're good.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. So, give me a story or two about the start of the church. So maybe how you came. I thought the one of you being up on Mount Helix was a good one to maybe start with, of just your thought of how. Yeah.
And the move from Michigan too.
Yeah.
When my dad received the call to come to San Diego, we were all against it. We didn't want to leave school. I had just started kindergarten. And I had heard stories about earthquakes and big spiders, tarantulas, and none of us wanted to come, but my mom was very supportive. A lot of people said, well, Dad, at 47, do you really want to start a church? That's, you're going to close to pushing 50. It's a lot of work, but no, we came, and the first week we lived in a motel, Miles Motel on Baltimore Avenue, and then Grandma Bush, who lived on La Mesa Boulevard, just up the street from AutoZone. She had a huge house, and there was nothing there. The Catholic Church wasn't there, most of those buildings. She had basically a farm, a huge house, and it was kind of a boarding house. And we stayed with her for 2 weeks. She had a barn, and she had cows, and she had chicken. And that was where we stayed until we purchased the first parsonage on El Capitan. And the biggest change for us was we were in a war. And up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, we were kind of not involved so much as we were. In fact, the day we left, the Sunday we left, we were having a farewell party. Is the day that December 7th, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. So when we got to California, everything was very strange. We had rationing, couldn't buy sugar, you could only buy so much sugar, so much flour, gasoline. When we left Michigan, my dad bought a brand new 1941 Plymouth, and he thought this is going to, be a good transportation car, and he's going to need a car when he gets to La Mesa. Well, when we got to La Mesa, the car was totally shot. They had forgotten to do something or put some oil in the crankcase, whatever it was. So when we got here, we had no car. So, but the first experience I had in La Mesa was we went up to Mount Helix. A friend took us up there and 6 years old, we had an air raid. And the sirens blew and the searchlights came on. And dirigibles, I don't know if you know what a dirigible is, but a dirigible is like a mini blimp. They were maybe 20 or 30 feet long. And these dirigibles were stationed on vacant lots, people's backyards. And each area of La Mesa had an air raid warden. And when that air raid siren rang, that was their job to crank those dirigibles up on cables at different heights, presumably in case the Japanese were to attack us, come in low to strafe us or something, that those dirigibles would stop them. So that was my first introduction to La Mesa.
And how did you feel when you heard the sirens?
Before you answer, I'm going to just ask you it's picking up the sound of you crinkling the paper. I know you got to do something with your hands.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. It's fine. It's just picking it up. We're good though.
I'm nervous.
I know. Don't
But you're doing good. You're
I've
doing
never
good.
been on TV.
You're with friends here. You're with friends. You're with fellow church members and friends, and
Yeah.
this is going to be an amazing
Yeah.
video when it's done.
Yeah. So again, like, how did you feel when you heard the sirens?
Terrified. I mean, 6 years old, I had no concept of what war was. Explained to me. And then as we lived in a motel, Miles Motel the first week, and then we stayed with Grandma Bush for two weeks until the parsonage was purchased. And then we got into the war mode where we had air raid wardens. We had to blacken out all of our windows with like a tar paper. And one night we got knocked on the door, and the air raid warden said that we had a little light shining, and all the street lights were blackened out facing the west. My dad had no car, and here he is, a missionary, starting a church. So what do? He walked door to door. And our first service was held in the VFW building on Spring Street. And we had 22 members at that first service. Amazing, considering my dad had no transportation. In the back, we had to go down, children, my sister Esther and my brother Andy, who was 18, a senior at Grossmont. We would go down about 5 o'clock in the morning and open all the doors and windows and try to get rid of the beer and smoke smell and sweep the floor up and get it ready. And we noticed that for the first 5 or 6 services that there was a man standing in the back of the church, and he had a suit on. He looked like he was, ready to worship. And we found out, my dad eventually asked who he was, and he identified himself as an FBI agent that was making sure that nothing was being preached against America, because my dad had previously preached many times in German. In fact, in Michigan we had a German service, and then we had an English service. When we moved into the parsonage on Carter Place, we found out we had Italian neighbors that were not allowed to leave their house after 6 o'clock. But we did have a neighbor, Dr. Gigliotti, who we found out was a personal advisor to President Roosevelt and had a direct phone to President Roosevelt, to the White House, and he was advising President Roosevelt on Italian affairs, things in the Italian community. And when my dad told him about this FBI agent, the next Sunday he was not there. So we were very thankful. And we were stopped once. I can remember we were stopped once. My dad had borrowed someone's car, and we were stopped once. He had all the hymn books in the back of the trunk, and they went through almost every page of those hymn books. And looking for a place to worship. During the war, buildings were scarce, and so we finally got the VFW, and we worshiped there until we purchased the dance hall on the corner of La Mesa Boulevard and Acacia. And that building served us till I think 1947, I'd have to check, 46. we tried many times to expand, and so the church didn't have much growth between 41 and 46 because the capacity of the church was 150 and we had about 200 members. So there wasn't much growth, but how he reached out into the community was, in my opinion, amazing. Next to the dance hall was a huge billboard, I mean, like you see along the freeway, and he rented that billboard and had, you know, Lutheran Church and you're welcome and that. He also rented the La Mesa Theater, which is on La Mesa Boulevard next to San Filipo's. It's now a Halloween and costume store. He rented that theater on Good Friday and had Good Friday services, and on Easter sunrise he would have 6 o'clock Easter sunrise services. I don't know what the capacity of the theater was, but I know it was full. And it was kind of funny because at that time he was criticized by other Lutheran pastors in the area. You can't have church services in a theater, you know, that's just not a good place. But he had many members or people that would come that wouldn't come to a church. In fact, skipping ahead, in 1947 and 1948, he rented the Rancho Drive-In off of 94. And he had Easter sunrise services there. And you know the old drive-ins where you drive in and put the speaker in your window, and that had capacity crowds. So he really reached out into the community in ways that a lot of other Lutheran churches or ministers didn't feel were appropriate, but he did reach out. And after we got to La Mesa, we had no car. There was a member of the church, an older gentleman, who had a second car, and he offered it to my dad. It was a 1932 DeSoto Coupe. They don't even make DeSotos anymore. And it had 2 passengers and a rumble seat. So my dad used that car, but Sorge was very embarrassed because the car was kind of dirty and rusty. So before he gave the car to my dad, he bought a can of black paint and painted it with the paintbrush. And I don't know what was worse, the rusty car or a black car that was had brush strokes and brush needles all on the fenders. And the worst part is that when we wanted to go someplace as a family, we had to sit in the rumble seat, which was open, you know, so we're spitting bugs out of our teeth as we drove along. And I guess other people loaned my dad cars, but I remember that he was asked to speak at a Walther Lee convention, you know, the old Walther Lee, and it was a big deal down at the U.S. Grant Hotel. And he had to take a bus. My mom and dad took a bus down because he had no car. And he was the keynote speaker at that conference, and he didn't feel good. And before he was to give his address, people were saying, "Pastor, you don't look good. You know, you're white and all of that." Well, he went ahead and did the speech anyway. And shortly after, I think it was Pastor Darmschroeder said, "I think we need to go see a doctor." And he went downtown someplace, and I remember that he said he had to walk upstairs to get to the doctor's office. And the doctor said, "You've just had a heart attack."
Okay.
So.
Wow. Wow, you must have had all these questions memorized because you went right down the line. So good job. Let's go down to one. What is a few timeless dynamics, things this congregation started with that you see today that the congregation has right now? So what are some timeless dynamics?
Well, I think based on the Bible and reaching out into the community was always my dad's purpose. And my dad always had kind of slogans, you know, and sometimes he would put those slogans on his stationery. I can remember one was, "You either need a missionary or you are a missionary." And I just thought that was kind of a great thing. And I can remember another one that he used a changeless Christ for a changing world. That was another one of his. He was a great orator, I guess, and had a tremendous personality that just worked out great. God certainly worked through him, because all the things that were thrown in his path, no car and heart attack, and yet the Lord just blessed him and the congregation. Once we bought this property, the congregation just grew with leaps and bounds. And I think it was because the gospel was always preached. He based everything on God's word. And he was a great outreacher. And I can see that in this church. I mean, reaching out into the community was in getting involved in the community.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk school for a little bit. And you were a teacher here. Mm-hmm. And so kind of the tagline for that is advancing Christ from generation to generation. Talk a little bit about the start of the school and maybe what you know of how that came about and the few teachers that started.
Mm-hmm. Well, after we built the parish hall, like I said, that was when we were in the dance hall. The growth of the church was not very great because people didn't want to come and stand, and the fire marshal would come every once in a while, and we've got to get out because it's 150 capacity, and we had like 160 or sometimes 200. But once we built the parish hall, and I think my dad and the members of the congregation realized that Christian day school, we had one when we were in Michigan, and that was a great mission outreach and also a great feeder for the church. And so we built the first unit of the L-shaped school with volunteer labor, and I think at that time I was about 13 or 14. And that's why I have back problems today, is carrying all those cinder blocks, because it was built for $9,000 and the first unit. And then as the Sunday school grew, and we had a huge Sunday school, at times I know that there were 400 and 500 students that we had in Sunday school. At that time also, Pilgrim Lutheran Church, Pastor Rumsch, started his church about the same time that we started Christ Lutheran. He came as a mission, as a vicar. And there was always a friendly rival between Pilgrim and Christ Lutheran as to who would have the biggest Sunday school or who would build the church first and so forth. And so we needed another education building. So the other unit of the L-shaped building was built. And then it was decided once we built the L-shaped building that we should start a Christian day school. And so that was in 1958. Don't check the record, but I think it was 1958. Ken Lamb was called to be the principal, and Eunice Elser came as a teacher, and we opened the school with Mrs. Elser taught first and second grade, Ken Lamb taught third and fourth grade. At that time I was ready to graduate in 1958, and it was very unusual that I was called to my home congregation, because in those days the call committee, if you asked to go to Nebraska, you were sent to Guam or someplace else. It seemed like they sent you to just the opposite place. But I received the position here at Christ Lutheran. So I came in 1958, and then I taught third and fourth, and Mr. Lamb taught fifth and sixth. And the school grew with leaps and bounds. And I think the following year we called Mr. McClary, and then I was involved in fifth and sixth grade. So I taught fifth and sixth, and Mr. McClary taught third and fourth, and Mrs. Elser was teaching first and second, Mr. Lamb seventh and eighth. And we didn't have a kindergarten at that time, and the Board of Education felt that the kindergarten would be great feeder for obviously first and second grade. So they tried for 2 or 3 years. They were not surprised they asked me to leave that year, but they didn't. So I remained for 6 years. Taught 6 years, and then I got the call to Pilgrim and took that challenge with a brand new school.
Okay.
I had 3 calls at the time, so it's very difficult. Sometimes I don't think lay people really understand the call system if you take it seriously. It was a tough decision, but I felt that the old Bible passage, a prophet is not, what does it say? A prophet is not something in his own land. You know what I'm trying to...
Oh, that doesn't do...
So I thought it was time. And beside the Lord led me. He said, I had calls to big schools, but I thought, what a challenge to go and start a brand new school. So I took that call.
So I know that you have a lot of fond memories of Mr. Lamb, and
Yes.
so do you want to speak just towards some of his, because he was also a teacher and a principal. Do you want to speak maybe towards some of the things he did throughout the years, starting the school, and just other times that you've seen? We'll do a couple, 2 or 3 stories. So.
Mr. Lamb was a very special person, a humble servant. And he did so many things that nobody knew about. He never wanted any accolade. He never wanted to be in the spotlight. And he was my mentor and very patient with me. I always said my first year of teaching was my 5th year of college, because you really come out and you don't really know until you have a group of 35 kids. Very organized and, like I said, very humble and very dedicated. And he always set such a good example. And I think that was my goal, is to always set a good example by my actions and by the way I lived my life. And he had his own system, and we did have a school secretary at one point that certainly helped out. And his discipline was so good, and he would talk to the students and talk to the parents, and it wasn't something that was always negative, or in those days you could spank students, you know. Well, we didn't spank them. We talked to them and talked to the parents and worked them out. And they sat out on the benches for a while until they cooled down. And he had a great filing system, though. I can remember my first year, if a student fell down and hurt themselves, we had to write it down. He was very meticulous in doing everything properly. And a student fell down, and we had to write down that we put a Band-Aid, or we had to file an accident report. And so he said, go and get the report, fill it out. So I went into the office. At that point, we had no secretary, and was looking under. I looked under first aid, and I looked under accident, and I looked under everything I could think of. And I said, Ken, I can't find the file. I said, what's it filed under? It's filed under forms. Oh, okay. So I got the form out, and we had a great relationship.
Kind of the same question as the church. We'll give him a second here.
So make sure we're still rolling.
Yeah.
Because the camera only goes for 20 minutes at a time, and then it kicks out.
Got
That's
it.
what happened in the middle of the candle story.
Got it. How have you seen the school? So again, I know that you're connected. So you started here, but you also been connected with the school, and you've seen the school throughout the years. How have you seen the school help build community throughout its existence?
Well, I think the school is the greatest outreach that the church has. I really do. And I've seen the school grow. Later on, when we built this facility, there were classrooms behind this before they built the gym. And eventually the school grew to where we had single classrooms. And I think it's always been a great outreach to the community. And as I see the school today, I wish I was 20 years younger and it could be teaching in it. Because I think Zave and the staff, and we're just so blessed. I mean, in my ministry at Pilgrim, I felt so blessed. And then when I come over here retired, went to the high school, but I come over here and I'm over to school 2 or 3 times a week. Sometimes they ask me to leave. I'm just kidding. But I have a great relationship with the teachers, and I go there because I feel the love and the warmth, and I have to have that shot every couple days, couple times a week, because of the joy and the feeling that I get just from the ambiance of the school. It's a great outreach, and I notice when we have new members, most of the time, most of them are come through the school. And what a greater way to build a person's Christian life is through teaching them about the gospel from preschool on. And we are so blessed to have the school and the staff that we have. I don't want to embarrass you, but you and Sherry with our youth, I mean, I'm all for that. And the youth is not the church of tomorrow, it's the church of today.
So you touched a little bit on this in your last comments, but we see you here quite often. We see you volunteering in the school. I see you periodically. I know we've done different things with our plants, but we've seen you helping out with plants here and stuff like that. What keeps you serving both the church and being out in the community? What keeps you doing that?
I think it was inherited because my dad just kept going. He not only did he have this heart attack that I mentioned to you, but he had surgery for a hernia. And then when I was in senior at Grossmont, he had taken me to a rehearsal for a pageant. And on the way home, a drunk hit him and broke both of his legs. And he was in the hospital. He just kept going. He's like that little bunny, just keeps going. And I guess by his example, and my mother was so involved in the church and worked with the Sunday school and the Ladies' Aid. And in addition to that, she was the chairperson for the Red Cross blood drive during the war. And it was her job, La Mesa, Spring Valley, and Lemon Grove, to get the quota of blood. And I was so impressed with my mother. She had a uniform, a gray skirt and a gray jacket and a gray hat with Red Cross on it. And that really impressed me. But it was their example to serve and constantly serve. And so when I retired, I wanted to teach 50 years. But the good Lord said 48, and that was it. But I substituted at Christ Lutheran, and I substituted at Lutheran High, and Zave told me that counts. So I did 50 years. So I achieved my goal.
Awesome. I have one more question, but I want to make sure you feel like you've gotten everything you need. You have a...
I've got everything I need.
Okay. I'll let you check this, and I'll ask this last question.
We're still going.
Okay.
Did I answer these questions?
Yeah, and you've answered a lot of the ones that, like, I haven't asked them because you
You're
just
rolling
kind of
together,
answered
which is good. It
them.
saves us from having to do this.
Yep. So, what do you hope future generations also take away from being a part of a Christ-centered community like Christ Lutheran Church?
What do I want them to take away?
What do you hope future generations take away?
A deep faith and a faith that is not just on Sunday morning, but is throughout their life, to serve others, to witness to others, and not only witnessing. And that was one of the great things that both my parents did. I would take my mother to Dixie Line, and sit her in the garden display while I did some shopping just to get her out. And I'd come out and there'd be 3 or 4 people, and she's witnessing all that. And I think that, and I do that too. I witness, I work in the neighborhood, and that's what I want to instill, not to be so self-centered, not to, I hope that this new generation with the smartphones and the computer, that they use that in a limited manner and actually go out into the community. And I think this youth conference that we had in New Orleans, it wasn't just to go and be inspired and to have fun, but they actually went out in the community and did things. And I think that's the example that we have to do. And so it's natural when you retire, this is my church, I love my church. If there's something I can do, I'll do it. And I take care of the plants in the school, and people ask me, what's your secret to the beautiful plants? I said, it's not me, it's the joy and the love that those plants feel in that building. That's the secret.
Well, that's all we want, but do you have anything else that you wanted to share? Any other thoughts? I know you prepared a lot, but...
Well, I just, all the details, I hope, what kind of concerns me is the archives are a mess. And we're coming up to a 75th anniversary.
Yeah.
And being a history teacher, it's very important to me. I've suggested several times that they get a few of the members, not necessarily me, but a few of the older members that can remember a few things and get that organized. Because eventually we're going to celebrate our 100th anniversary. But, the changes that I've seen in La Mesa, when my dad, when the dance hall was crowded, he tried to get other property, or we tried to build. You couldn't because of the war effort. You couldn't get lumber, you couldn't get a permit, and the city was very difficult. We put a bid on where I always want to call it St. Rose, that's the one in Chula Vista, St. Martin de Tours. We put a bid on that property. But that was a political thing because the mayor was Catholic and blah, blah, blah. So the Catholic Church got it. This piece of property was purchased and then for a little or nothing, I think $3,000. And then the property west of the church, would it be that way, I guess, came up and we bought that. Well, we built the church. And Vaughn's was nothing but a marsh. La Mesa Springs, it's a spring. It was full of water. We went down there and threw rocks at the crawdads and frogs. Nothing but a swamp. And the area, in fact, Spring Street is called Spring Street because of the spring. When we first came here, there was you know where Collier Park is? There was an actual water fountain there that ran 24/7 from a spring, a natural spring. We'd go down there and fill our milk bottles up with the spring water. And Mr. Jones, who owned the La Mesa Theater, became friends with my dad, and that's how he got the theater. Well, then they they actually filled a lot of that up, that swampy area, with sawdust and stuff from La Mesa lumber, and then they graded it off, and the Helix Theater was built. A brand new Helix Theater was built down there, and on the corner of La Mesa and University was a car sale dealership, DeSoto, and then the Helix Theater. Well, that's all changed too. And this end of the property where our shopping center is, that was kind of swampy too, but they did a lot of grading. So a lot of changes. La Mesa Boulevard, where AutoZone is, that was all vacant lot until you came to Grandma Bush's big house, and she had a barn. And even Mission Valley in 1957, I worked at Sharp Hospital, and I'd go down Mission Valley, and the corn was on the right, and I'd stop and get corn, and the dairy was on the left. And when I went up to Sharp Hospital, it sat up there like a monument. There was nothing around it. And now look at
it's all built up.
So an awful lot of changes have taken place in La Mesa.
Well, and Christ Lutheran, was Christ Lutheran always, almost from its get-go, kind of an East County church instead of just a La Mesa church? Or was it?
Yes, because there was no Spring Valley church. Trinity moved to Lemon Grove, and they're still there now. And that's the one that has the food bank for the homeless, and I've worked there too. Worked with setting up the food bank. I worked for Father Joe.
Wow.
Outreach is outreach, whether they're Catholic, and somebody else, a Catholic. I said, they're homeless, they're souls, What difference does it make if they're Catholic or Jewish or whatever? It was a great experience. And the reward you get from doing that is you can't express how it makes you feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just, and I hope that is something that can be instilled in these young people. It's the reward you get is you can't put a price tag on it. So.
Perfect. Nat, thank you for taking the time to do
My
this.
pleasure.
I appreciate it.
I
Good.
don't want to repeat our mistake, but the way the Lord has blessed Christ Lutheran Church is just amazing. Look at where we are today. My dad would be so proud to come back and see what has been accomplished. You know, never in his wildest dreams did he ever dream we'd have a beautiful new school and all of those things. He did leave to see that building completed. And I think my mother broke ground. She was the groundbreaker for the gym. But he didn't live to see that.
And she was still around when they did the preschool in Lucas Hall. She was here for
Yeah,
that too.
well, they dedicated that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Nat, thank you.
Yeah. You're not interested in any dates or anything?
Do you want me to make copies of those so you can keep that, and then we can maybe that's just something we can refer to as well, and then as we organize that nice archive, we can put it in the archive as well.
I would hope somebody would get in there. There's some members that could do that.